the thing people forget about empathy is you can have empathy for someone else without agreeing with any of their choices.
Today on an Inspirational People Interview on the Share Life podcast, I'm speaking with Theresa Ward. Teresa, say hello.
Hello, everyone.
I'm Jason Scott Montoya, and this interview, we're going to dive into Teresa's story, what she thinks about stories, systems, and mentoring. Teresa is a keynote speaker, a facilitator, culture and communication coach, and the founder of Fiery Feather, which helps organizations get things done while enjoying the process and the journey along the way. So Teresa, to get us started, tell us about you, your story, and how you ended up where you are now.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, so my story, I guess, starts with a lot of change. I moved around a ton as a kid.
Okay.
So
Like
adaptability,
around the country, around the world?
around the Midwest.
Okay, around the Midwest. So where did you start? What state?
Bopped around from Cleveland, Ohio, down to
Okay.
Cincinnati, Indianapolis. A lot of
Ah,
my extended family is from Michigan, so spent a
okay.
lot of time in the Great Lakes region.
Wow.
But as we moved around as a family, my dad changing jobs and whatnot, constantly having to go to new schools and make new friends, I had to learn a lot of adaptability,
Mm,
which you do as a kid to socially survive, but it's hard then to find your true sense of authenticity.
mm, yeah.
So
And
after,
what age range? Like how old were you when the movie started, and until about what
oh,
age did it ever stop?
preschool to high school.
Okay, so you went through it all every season. Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's neither good or bad, right?
Yeah.
It's just a pattern you get used to, a skill that you develop. So then you kind of settle in, right, to adulthood. And after school, I think I really had to get in touch with, well, what are my authentic passions? What are my authentic strengths? And how can I showcase those in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
Even though I'm like a Gen X millennial cusp, but I feel in my soul very Gen X.
Yeah.
So when I got into the working world, I just started in sales, in a call center, and I was kind of just blindly ambitious. This is what you
Mm,
do. You work a job, you get a raise, you get a promotion, you don't look up, you don't take vacation days, you
yeah.
don't think twice. You get the
Mm,
401k, you make dad proud. Along the way, then 15 years in, 12, 15 years into my career, I kind of looked up and wondered, well, what am I doing here? I was in the
hmm.
financial technology space. I had done sales and product management and relationship management and innovation, all kinds of things. And then one day I was like, I'm not even passionate about this industry.
Mm,
Am I allowed to say that?
yeah.
Allowed to have a longing or a seeking for something that is, more authentic to me beyond just
Yeah.
working hard?
Yeah, no, I can relate. I mean, I had a marketing agency for 7 years from 2007 to 2014, and one of the questions I asked at the end was like, if I could do anything vocationally, would it be to to own and run a marketing agency? And my answer was no. I was like,
Ah,
this is what I want to do. So I ended up shutting it down, which was like a big deal. But it seems like a similar dynamic to your experience.
well, absolutely. And I think it's undervalued to ask yourself those questions,
Mm.
or I think it was historically.
Yeah.
Generationally, things are getting a lot better about being
Hmm.
introspective and reflective about your sense of
Mm.
purpose, your passions. So it took me a while to get there. When I did finally leave the traditional corporate America space, what I realized looking back, and that was in 2017, 2018, what I
Okay.
realized looking back
Pre-pandemic.
pre-pandemic, it
Yeah.
was post-election 2016, but
Yeah. Yeah.
pre-pandemic, right? Which was
Yeah.
like, it was a transitional time for a lot of folks.
Yeah.
Yet the thing that I realized was in every single role that I had been assigned to or had taken, I always ended up doing the training.
Mm.
And formally then got trained in adult learning theory and facilitation techniques. That really allowed me to diversify outside of the specific financial technology industry that I was in and to say, oh, these are human skills, being able to walk folks through change management and behavior
Hmm.
shifts and learning new skills and new product knowledge that then they can go apply in real life. So it was fun to then diversify my skill set. And I just did that as a freelancer for a couple years. So 2017, 2018, I just went through my Rolodex of
Yeah.
contacts and said, do you need help with any projects?
Yeah.
And that is
Now,
advice that I would recommend, to other freelancers and
yeah.
entrepreneurs who are getting started. Just ask people if they need help with projects and you'll
Yeah.
figure out something.
Yeah. So tell me, well, two questions there. I'll start with the first. Going from corporate America to freelancing is a big change. How did you feel in that transition?
Well, I did have a part-time job contracting job to kind of help pay the bills. So I was very grateful for that bridge. I didn't
Yeah.
have to completely swim across the river. I had some stepping stones.
Yeah.
But in all honesty, I felt quite a bit of shame because I had developed an identity and a story around ambition and
Mm,
promotions and raises and successes. And all of the sudden, I had no good story to tell. I knew that
yeah.
I needed to leave deep in my soul, but it didn't look good. When people go,
Mm.
well, you must be leaving for a much more high powered opportunity. Where are you going? And I'm like, don't ask. I just got to figure this stuff out.
Was that a self-imposed shame or something that you grew up with that you carried with you?
Oh, maybe a little bit of both. Mostly
Yeah.
self imposed. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Enneagram 1,
Yeah. Okay.
if you're familiar with that language,
What
perfection,
would,
basically.
okay. What would that be on Myers-Briggs? Or
Um,
what do you know your Myers or John
yeah, I don't
or Big
know that
Five?
it would necessarily translate, but just a
Oh, okay.
inner drive or desire to always be right, to always be good, to always do the best.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So tell me more about
About
that.
that part of me.
Well, yeah, where does that come from and how have you sort of how did that evolve during that moment?
Yeah. I think it helped in a lot of ways. I was blessed with not only that internal sense of drive and ambition to just hustle and figure it out, but I had also stuck out a lot of grunt work, I guess, early in my career. Being a inside sales in a call center is not glamorous, right?
Yeah.
You get hung up on and sworn at.
Rejected over and over.
Yeah. But it's like boot camp for life.
Hmm.
So I think that really helped me in my entrepreneurial journey. So a little bit of grit, maybe,
Hmm.
and realizing that not everything was going to be easy or to be smooth, but it's a bit of a number. You just keep trying, you just keep asking, you explore, and then you iterate if it doesn't
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that helped. It was a lot of also, again, really doing that internal reflecting and checking in and realizing, where am I rare? What is my value? When you're in a
Mm.
corporate space, everyone around you knows how to use Outlook and spreadsheets,
Hmm.
and everyone's kind of got the type A suit thing going on. And then, I would go and work with, like you, a small business entrepreneur who ran a creative agency or a marketing agency, or folks who ran a nonprofit. And it's like they're so good at their craft, but they didn't have that structure or the
Hmm.
systems in place that corporate did.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, something that's common in one space is now rare in another.
Hmm.
So that was really helpful to realize.
Yeah, that no, I can relate to that a lot because, when I jumped into freelancing, I applied my business systems and structures and
Yep.
insights into my
Yep.
business of one. And I had no intention of building a team because I kind of been there, done that. But then I discovered what you discovered, which is within the freelancing world, like freelancers, it's a famine of there's an absence of that structure, which is why so many of them struggle. And that was an opportunity for me, and it sounds like that was the opportunity for you as well.
Totally. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can see that. Yep.
yeah. So where does that take us? Where does that go from that point? You're transitioning from corporate world to freelancing. You have this bridge business or bridge job, and what then?
Mm, what then? A lot of those bumpy lessons, right? That you learn up front, not charging enough, taking
Mm.
on too many clients, over promising and under delivering.
Yep.
Let this be my public service announcement to apologize to every
Yeah.
client I had during the first year of my freelancing, because
Yeah.
you're just figuring it out. But I did
Hmm.
have a lot of really supportive folks in my network, and they were willing to
Hmm.
give me real feedback. So I'm
Yeah.
very appreciative of
Yeah.
that. And I think I
So you go ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, you have a time machine. You go back to that version of you that
Yeah.
first year. What do you tell her?
Well, I'm not sure that I would tell her to do anything different because I think we have to learn through our mistakes.
Yeah.
And then we have to just fall in love with those mistakes
Uh-huh.
so that we can have these wise, redemptive, reflective conversations like we're having now. So
Yeah.
I think I would just tell her, like, you're doing okay, right? It's not
Yeah.
perfect. And I know that's uncomfortable and you think you're letting some
Yeah.
folks down, but it's all for the best.
Yeah.
It's all
Well,
for the
have you ever seen the movie Interstellar?
Oh yeah.
So remember the scene at the end when he's like looking back and he's trying to tell her something and she can't hear him?
Yeah.
Like, that's an interesting dynamic of like being able to see something that someone else can't. In his case, he wanted to tell her and he was stopped. In your case, you would maybe want to tell her something, but you know you shouldn't, so you wouldn't. But that I think to let past you make those mistakes, like if you think about being a parent or just a boss, sometimes
Mm-hmm.
you have to do that. So tell me about that dynamic of just letting people fail,
Jeez. Letting people fail.
especially people you love.
That's a really interesting area to explore. One of the keynotes that I'm preparing right now is called True Confessions of a Toxic Manager,
Hmm.
because I think when I was in my early corporate leadership roles, I was so afraid to fail that it made me very worried about other people
Hmm.
because it would be a reflection on me.
Yeah. So
So
your reputation or something
Ye
else.
yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Reputation, yep, and that again, that internal sense of, being enough, being successful, and having
Hmm.
that just kind of that low key anxiety all the time. So I think the thing that I would coach some of my clients on now, especially those who are new managers and new leaders, there's a concept about the water line. Okay, so you picture a ship and it's sitting in the water, and part of the hull is underneath the water and part of it is above.
Okay.
Failures that happen above the water line are not going to sink the ship, right? So if you poke a hole in the side of the boat that's above the water line, okay, this is inconvenient. We will patch it up with some duct tape or some tar or whatever, and we will sail on.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for leaders, mentors, to allow people to fail above the waterline. Now, if it's, hey, you're 22 and we're going to just fly you out to see our biggest client alone, unprepared. And if you mess up, you're going to ruin 70% of the company's revenue. Like that's the waterline failure. So leaders should not set up their folks for
Yeah.
that are really going to sink the ship.
So
That's
I think that, yeah, I think that's such an amazing visual because, obviously we have to discern like what is below and above the waterline, but it
that's hard.
creates this visual framework to identify the difference between what is an existential threat
Yep.
that will destroy us all and what is a failure, maybe a safe failure is a good way to say that. And I think as a society or a large portion of our society, we have become so controlling that we protect the upper side of above the waterline failures to such a degree that the under the lines become more likely because people aren't who they need to be in order
Obedience.
to go. Yeah, dive into that.
Yeah. Well, mistakes are going to happen. So I think as a leader, how can you create a psychologically safe space where folks can say, I don't know, or they say, I need help, or I messed up. So if,
Mm.
if you can establish trust with the small failures, I think
So what do you mean by that? Because
it's
are you suggesting like, hey, someone fails, but you still have enough trust to operate within those failures? Is that what you mean, or do you mean something else?
when I think about how leaders can establish trust with their teams, I think it's everything from demonstrating vulnerability to expressing genuine concern for who are you? Do you have kids? What do you like to do on weekends? Someone said to me once, I wish I could remember where I read this or where I heard this, but if you don't try and get in touch with your own inner child, your team's inner child, they're going to bring it to work anyway. You
Mm,
just won't be able to recognize that they're
yeah.
bringing in, their father was very hard on them, or they had to compete with, 13 siblings to get attention and those kinds of things. So I think it's really just opening up a lot of those soft conversations when when the boat is not even in the water.
Yeah,
When you're not
yeah.
even working on a project where there is potential failure.
And so where does the controlling behavior, how does it unfold from protecting below the waterline to starting to protect higher and higher up the waterline?
When you say controlling behavior, what do you mean?
Well, like protective controlling behaviors. I can't let them, let's say it's in your business. I can't let this person have, let's say, social media control over social media because they might post something and it has a spelling error. So now
Mm,
I'm sort of controlling something that, like, if there's a spelling error, probably no one's going to care.
mhm,
Um, but now as a maybe a business owner has become so controlling that they're literally like micromanaging in that
mhm,
way.
mhm,
Whereas they're, instead of going, okay, that's above the line
mhm,
issue, I'm controlling it as if it's a below the line.
mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So I think that
I get
creeps
what
over
you're
time.
asking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've coached a client on recently around this area is get together with your folks and hit reset and establish what are sort of those minimum baseline requirements of success. This is what's most important on our social media account. Does everything
Hmm.
need to be spelled perfectly? No. But just riffing and making some big political statement without approval, okay, that goes in the squarely not okay
Yeah.
category. So I think if you can democratically involve your folks in saying what are those minimum requirements of success, and as long as these are taken care of,
Mm.
I'm not going to get in your way. But if we are not sure, is this political or is this not political?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like kind of I guess what I'm hearing you say is you define where the line is, what is above and what is below.
I think so,
Yeah.
but not just doing it with a bullhorn,
Yeah,
with a
as a
megaphone, right?
dictation,
Doing
but
it
as a
democratically.
collaborative participatory process.
It's slow. And I think
Yeah.
that's why a lot of leaders avoid doing it. It can
Mm,
feel nonlinear,
yeah.
inefficient, but slow is smooth and smooth is fast, I love
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
phrase.
Okay. So where are we at in your story? Let's go to the next part.
Well, I guess in the first couple of years of my freelance slash entrepreneurial journey, yes, I
Yeah.
figured out where I could help people, what skills were more effective. I started marketing myself as a productivity consultant because I was so
Okay.
good at time management and
Mm.
prioritization and setting goals. And I nerded out over all of those books.
And what
So
year was that?
2017,
Okay.
2018,
Okay.
going into 2019 and 2020.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when the pandemic hit, it was a real hot, success time for me because a lot of my clients were, oh, we were already kind of struggling and now we're really struggling.
Mm,
How do we work from home? How do we manage remote employees? Which goes back to the trust conversation that we just had.
yeah.
How do we measure certain metrics? How do we even sustain our basic cultural values now that everybody's at home in their sweatpants doing God knows what? So that was great until about Q1 2021.
Mm,
So if we think back to, January 2021, again, we had just had another election. There was a lot of social and political unrest. People were
mm-hmm.
so burnt out from the pandemic. That was, I think, before the vaccine had even been proved. So people were drained, burnt out. That's when we started to hear the great resignation as the season that employees were in, just saying, I don't feel cared for by my company. They don't align with my values. They want me to work too hard when I'm trying to have my kids at home, virtual learning. I'm done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then none of my clients wanted to talk about productivity because productivity
Oh.
was causing them and their employees too much stress. So we had to shift the conversation. So since, from a marketing expert,
Yeah.
I can't change who I am. I can't, I'm not completely doing a 180 on the value, but instead of doing workshops on time management, now I'm doing workshops on getting in touch with your purpose or communicating with
Mm,
emotional intelligence and some of those softer skills, which was a
yeah.
really important, that was an important evolution, not just for my
Mm,
clients, but for me as well.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and that seems to me as the origin story of with Fiery Feather
Yep.
being it was helping people get stuff done, and that was the evolution of adding in the and enjoying the journey along the way. It's both together, and that fused it. It seems like that moment fused it together, but you tell me.
I always had that tagline, but I think I made it more authentic during that
Okay.
season. Because,
Okay.
yes, absolutely effective teams need structure, they need guidelines,
Mm,
they need shared agreements. You need policies in a lot of cases, depending
yeah.
on the size of your team. And you need to be able to support authentic
Hmm.
relationships. Again, have those trusted conversations. So it's both the systems and the soft skills that are
Yeah.
really, really key
Yeah.
pillars.
So Andy Stanley says something like, "We can't have certainty, but clarity is the next best thing."
Ooh, I like that.
And so clarity, I think that's what I'm hearing from you is like you get clear on these things. So now everyone understands there's no ambiguity, and that gives them stability and security, which they can operate within or around.
Do you know the locus of control?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think no matter what degree of clarity or certainty you have or you don't have, one needs the discerning skill of remembering there are things I can control, there are
Yeah.
things I can influence, and then there's everything else.
Yeah.
So what's the only thing you can really control is sort of your own behavior and how you show up
Hmm.
when things are clear and how you show up when they're unclear.
Hmm.
So VUCA is this acronym, VUCA, that originally was a military
Okay.
term, and it's how does one operate in volatile, ambiguous, chaotic, and uncertain environments.
Mm,
Sorry, volatile, uncertain acronyms I can spell, I swear. Volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous environments. And that's one of the reasons that I love teaching change management and resilience to
mm,
change, because there are companies, we all know teams and company cultures where they spend so much time planning, and their strategic planning spreadsheet is 1,000 rows long, and they think they've got everything very, very clear, but they
mm,
aren't able to pivot when a curveball comes in, whether
yeah.
that's a huge thing like the pandemic or even just
Yeah.
some small thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like the Titanic when it sees the iceberg, it can't get out of the way, right? It just crashes into it, and then all the tragedy unfolds.
They're scrolling
So
through their spreadsheet. Oh no, we didn't plan this. Yeah.
but take pause there for a moment. Did your upbringing, did your pivot from corporate America to freelancing, how did that equip you for the pandemic chaos in the 2016 chaos, in the 2020 chaos? How did it prepare you, or did it like were you ready for it, or did you have to kind of go through another learning process as well, or a combination of
I
both?
don't think anybody can claim that they were ready for it. Have you ever interviewed somebody who says they were ready for it? I don't know. I think they might be lying.
Tell me more. So what was it? Was it this the scale that hit you?
I don't think any more or less than anybody else. I think in all of the changes that have been handed my way, if I can again think back to as a kid being, hey, pack up, we're moving again, we're moving cities again. My parents did a great job of emphasizing the positive, of emphasizing the benefits of the change that was coming,
Yeah.
and saying, hey, there's something in this for you. I know it seems sad right now and it seems
Hmm.
disruptive, and you have to leave your favorite neighborhood park, or you're not going to be a part of that cheerleading squad anymore.
Yeah.
But I think that's a real strategy, which is to focus on what you can control and to focus on the positive.
Hmm.
So I think that was part of it. I am also just in my DNA, whether it's from my upbringing, nurture or nature, whatever you want to call it, I'm a very action biased person.
Mm.
So for me, it's relatively easy to sift through, decide what I can control, and then run with it,
Yeah.
even if the decision and the action is not always the wisest or the most thought through. To me, a lot of times, like motion feels better than
Hmm.
indecision. So doing
Yeah.
something rather than nothing worked for me. I'm
Mm.
not saying that that's going to work for everybody when they get big big curveballs
Yeah.
in life, but it is one strategy.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
let me throw this at you then.
Yeah.
When is doing something actually harmful instead of helpful?
Ooh, I've done that enough times, I think, to actually have an answer. When it doesn't align with your
Mm,
values,
that's good. Yeah.
when you haven't taken a deep breath and tuned into your gut, when you don't trust yourself,
Yeah.
you know? Which is, I mean, thankfully, it's one of those things that gets easier as we get older.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, I've been through this before, or something similar to this. Let
Yeah.
me just, close my eyes, take a deep breath in, get in touch with like what's going on in my belly right now. And I know
Hmm.
that sounds a little silly and a little woo woo, but they call it your gut instinct for a reason.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think I'm finally learning that my gut will direct me towards a better place than my brain.
Mm. Well, the visual that comes to mind is the Navy SEALs. As part of their training, they drown them. And I think that if you don't have that experience and then you're out in like an actual situation and you're having that same situation and you feel those same things, you've never felt them before, so you're going to react to them as if it's the first time. But if
Hmm.
you've experienced it before and you know how it unfolds and how that plays out, then you have something you didn't have before that helps you when it happens again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like I read a book that sort of talked about that.
Okay.
People who tend to survive plane crashes and, these big disasters and how their brain works and the
Yeah.
choices that they make that are different,
Hmm.
getting lost in the woods and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And denial is a part of that. Amanda Ripley wrote a book
Hmm.
on that topic. She tells a story about this person that was in the twin trade towers on 9/11 after it got hit. And in her mind, she just said, "Oh, everything's fine. It's just a fire." It's just her normal category of making sense of it
Wow.
convinced her that it was fine. But there was somebody else like who you're describing, which was like, we have to get out now. And this person was able to save all these people because she got them out of the building when they were
Wow.
just thinking nothing was wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish there was an easy formula for
Yeah.
those kinds of complex situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2021 to now, what's the last leg of your story here?
2021 till now, I think there's definitely a sense of settling
Hmm.
and I bought a home, right? In
Yeah.
Atlanta, Georgia, and you put down roots with your community. And it's
Hmm.
nice to be in a season where, entrepreneurship is hard, right? It's a roller coaster. You're at the whims of the economy and a lot of other factors, but I am learning to just ride it out.
Hmm.
I am learning to trust myself in those patterns, right? Of, oh, this isn't
Yeah.
an epic disaster. I mean, I know it's kind of the opposite of what you just said, but it is kind of like, it's okay. There's a little smoke and there's a little fire. I don't need to leave the building right now. Like I
Yeah.
am going to be okay.
Yeah.
And settling and putting down roots really has both within, I mean that metaphorically, both within
Yeah. Yeah.
myself and literally here in my
Hmm.
community. It feels really good after all of those stories I told you about bopping around different cities and different neighborhoods as a kid that now I know all of my neighbors' names.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know when you'll release this, but as of today, Atlanta had some snow. As of yesterday, Atlanta
Yeah.
had some snow, which some people can deal with easier than others. And I'm really grateful that my neighbor sent me a text this morning and she said, "Hey, I got in a wreck, on an
Mm.
ice patch. I'm stranded. Can you come help me? Can you take care of my dogs?" And it was like, absolutely, right? And we just got in the
Yeah.
car and she was so grateful. And she's like, "I'll bake you some more pumpkin bread." And that's a really
Yeah.
nice place
Yeah.
to be when not only do I know my neighbors' names, but they know that they can
Hmm.
reach out to me for
Yeah.
help.
And that they did it and that you provided enough of a relationship for them to want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I think, big picture speaking, it's been for the last couple years. And it do you know the Japanese concept of Ikigai?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for listeners, then just a quick recap. It's sort of this sweet spot of living into your purpose where you are operating at the intersection of what you are good at, skill wise,
Hmm.
what you love doing, what brings you energy, what the world needs and what your society will pay you
To
to
do
do.
it or to buy.
Yeah, so I am very grateful to be operating in a sweet spot of Ikigai, and I hope
Hmm.
that I could just continue to pour out what I've learned, sharing that in my workshops and my coaching with my clients. And also, it's like a spiral, right? So
Hmm.
you pour out what you've learned, and just when you
Hmm.
think you've got it, then here comes a big old learning opportunity, right? Where
Mm.
you fill back up and you kind of continue that upward spiral.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it almost is I think in different realms. So like you might in one relationship you might kind of figure it out, and now you've got it at your business. It's a little bit bigger this time, and then you've got it in your community or in your society. Like the
Oh,
problem is the same at the root, but it kind of manifests in a bigger way, and so the challenge gets bigger. So you have to navigate the complexities of those different dynamics as they
oh
get
yeah.
bigger. Yeah,
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, that's really juicy. Yep. I
yeah.
like that. That's good.
So how does Ikigai, you seem like you've got all these concepts you discover and then you latch onto and they help you and then you share them. Tell me about that.
Well, I think I said this actually before we started recording, but there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
There's just different seasons of our culture and our society. What do we need to hear? Who do we need to hear it from? Like you said, where do I apply it? Is it, in my personal life, my relational life, my,
Yeah.
broader community life? So I've always enjoyed learning, digesting, different concepts from a wide range of authors, experts, different sources, different metaphors. I think one of those skill sets that I didn't realize was rare, but if I can toot my own horn, I guess it's pretty rare, is being able to synthesize all
Hmm.
of these different frameworks. And
Yeah.
then when a situation calls for it with an individual or a team that I'm coaching or I'm consulting with, it's very, I liken it to Mary Poppins. I mean, she's
Yeah.
kind of my imaginary character hero where she's got that carpet bag and that
Mm,
thing is, who knows what's in there? It's way bigger than it looks on the surface. And she can kind of stick her arm down in there and pull out the lamp or the umbrella or whatever tool is needed in the situation. So that's how I think about some of these
yeah.
frameworks. I'm keeping them all in my Mary Poppins carpet bag.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Just as a sidebar, one of my favorite lines from Mary Poppins is "but firm."
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think she's a really, how Fiery Feather is kind of this dichotomous brand. It is meant to be about focus and getting things done, as well as a lighthearted exploration of what's
Yeah.
possible or what's yet unseen.
Yeah.
And she really does truly embody, she is no nonsense, but you are also going to have a good time.
Yeah.
You are going
Well,
to learn
yeah.
something and have a really memorable experience while
Yeah.
you're doing it with her.
Well, I'm gonna throw out an idea. When you go and speak at that next event, I want you to walk out with your Mary Poppins bag and your umbrella and your hat.
Yeah, and it'll be a bonus if I can get the end of the umbrella with the little parrot to talk,
Yeah, there you go.
on stage.
Um, but the synthesizing, Adam Grant put out a quote the other day. He
Yeah,
said the hallmark of expertise is no longer how much you know, it's how well you synthesize.
sure.
Information scarcity rewards knowledge acquisition, but information abundance requires pattern recognition. So
Isn't
it's not
that
enough to
true?
collect the facts. The future belongs to those who connect the dots.
I, that's so true. And I think that's just been the shift of I was not a digital native, right? When I was
Yeah.
born, when I was in school, you had to memorize things.
Yeah.
Now, why would you?
Hmm.
Why would I use up brain cells remembering people's phone numbers or any other
Yeah.
factoid that
Hmm.
is Googleable?
Yeah. I don't even know my wife's phone number.
That's vulnerable. Thanks for sharing. So yeah, now it's more just how do I develop the skills for
Yeah.
resourcefulness? And we'll see, right? With the advent of artificial intelligence, what is the most meaningful thing that we can do with the
Yeah.
information that's out there? Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, when you think about the idea of like living better and working smarter, what comes to your mind? How does one go about that?
Okay, so I am going to read a quote since you just read an
Yeah.
Adam
Yeah.
Grant
Yeah.
quote. I've been thinking about this, and this is a quote from James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
I just posted this a couple weeks ago. You have to work hard to discover how to work smart. You won't know the best solutions until you've made nearly all the mistakes.
Mm.
So when I think about working smarter, um, I think it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier, that you gotta get a couple holes in the boat first. Like, you have to kind of feel what it feels like to be a Navy SEAL who's
Yeah.
drowning, or to feel like the ship is going
Hmm.
down.
The stakes. You have to feel the stakes at hand.
Yeah. Because
Mm.
if working easier isn't the same as working smarter, I think
Yeah.
there's just because something is more efficient doesn't necessarily mean it's more wise or more
Hmm.
intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah.
That answer might evolve in a couple weeks, but what are you thinking about lately when you think about what it means to work smarter?
Well, I think well, so the idea of prioritization comes to mind. And so there's a lot of things we could be doing at any one time. And you mentioned iteration multiple times. So I think iterating our priorities, kind of putting out a hypothesis of, hey, if I do this, I think it's going to have a benefit. Like there are 10 things that I think can generate the benefit I'm looking for. But when I work with my clients, I operate in this framework. And the first step in the process is what I call low hanging fruit, which is high impact, low
High impact, low
effort.
effort. Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly what was in my mind, was that two. If I could put
Yeah.
my whole life in a 2 by 2 matrix, like,
You got it.
yes, I'm totally with.
So, um, so that is what I'm looking for with my clients when I work with them. So if we're doing like,
Yeah.
okay, they've got a content library, they've got all these blogs. How do we get more traffic from Google? Let's go. Well, what are the things we can do that will be have that high impact and low and our low effort? In the technical sense, with SEO, it's title tags. You update your title tags,
Okay.
and so for me, I'm thinking about that in terms of when there's also in that sense, I've done SEO for so long that I've identified those things beforehand,
Probably
right?
through some
So
mistakes, right?
yes, through a lot of mistakes and
Yeah.
experimenting,
Mm-hmm.
and but when you're going in a direction you haven't quite been before, you kind of have to kind of think of it like in Star Trek. The Enterprise sends out these probes
Yeah.
into the nebula, and there are 3 or 4 probes to kind of survey the area. And so these sending out 4 or 5 experiments in
Yeah.
these 4 or 5 directions that I think are the best of the directions, and seeing which one makes the most sense to move towards.
Mm-hmm.
So I think of working smarter as having a system and process for being able to do that, but also to adjust priorities in almost as real time as possible to move towards the goal, which requires vision and clarity at the beginning of the process to know where you're going. Because
Yep.
if I'm running a race without a finish line, I'm just going to wander around in circles.
Amen. Right. Knowing what is good enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing what the
Yeah.
big goal is, and
Hmm.
then holding your little goals along the way more loosely and more flexibly. I think the
Yes.
other thing that I'm learning to honor is really the seasonality of our
Hmm.
life.
Yeah. That's good.
So if you think about the 4 seasons, and this is a good New Year's resolution kind of thing to do, is to put everything in your life into one of these 4 seasons. So if you have things in your life that are in winter, it's sort of like this is an idea, and it hasn't really, nothing's really happening with it yet. Oh, I might write another book, or I wonder if I should reorg my team. Should I redo my website? Those are winter things.
Yeah.
And then, spring is what we are traditionally used to in the corporate and
Hmm.
professional space. You
Hmm.
work, and there's needs to be results, and it's growth, and you're pruning and you're mulching, and it's like the flurry of activity, and there's a lot of visibility.
Hmm.
But I think we also forget that things can be in summer, where you are meant to just sit under the apple tree and the apple falls and you go, "Oh, this is so nice." And you just eat the
Hmm.
apple.
Yeah.
And I think we tend to put everything in our life into spring. At least that
Hmm.
is what a capitalist society is mostly centered around, is spring style activity.
Yeah.
So to know it's okay for things to sit in winter and germinate. It's okay for me to, let certain, I don't know, call it your relationship with your best client. It's
Yeah.
probably in summer. It
Yeah.
doesn't need the same amount of effort as it
Hmm.
did last year or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But also, everything eventually has an autumn.
Hmm.
It has a season where you have to kind of burn it down and either like creatively reinvent it or just compost it and let it go.
Yep. And
So I'm really
yeah,
loving that as working
yeah.
smarter. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's good. I in my book, The Jump, I talk about when I ended up shutting down the company, the final year we actually took a Sabbath year.
Yeah.
And so
Mm,
we
wow.
you know, no one has, I'd never heard of any of a company taking a Sabbath for a year.
Yeah.
And so we kind of had to invent it. But it
Nice.
was exactly what you described, is like we knew going into it that it could
Yeah.
either be like this ends and something new is, or the company is reborn in
Yeah.
a new sort of new iteration. We didn't know what was going to be next. And it ended up, about halfway through discovering, actually shutting it down was the
Yeah.
right thing to
Yeah.
do. So, which was
Hmm.
traumatic in a lot of ways, but it
Sure.
was, like you said, it died, and then out of the ashes came something new for
Yeah.
all of us that were
Yeah.
involved.
I love that you just like, oh, let me just pull up my book. That's like right here. And the one I have right next to me is Wintering.
Oh, okay. I've heard of it. I never
Yeah.
read it though. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not, I mean, it's a relatively easy read, and I've got a few things dog-eared in here, but I will say
Okay.
if there ends up being listeners of
The
this
Wintering. What's the
episode,
author's name?
Catherine May,
Catherine
May.
May. Okay.
Yeah. So it's
What's the
really
basic premise of the book for those
like
that might be?
that you need to let yourself slow down for longer than a 5-minute YouTube break.
Yeah.
That there are often extended seasons where you are not going to feel productive. You're
Mhm.
gonna feel kind of terrible. And we did all experience that during the pandemic lockdown. So I think we now know viscerally what that feels like. Nobody really wants that to be forced upon them. But it's kind of like you either recognize it when it's happening and you let it happen, or you hear about this all the time, right? People just going, 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 working 80, 90 hours a week, and then they have
Mhm.
a literal physical breakdown.
Yeah.
So their
Yeah.
body puts them into
Yeah.
winter.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, we've all been there. You're like, oh, how
Yeah.
convenient. I have the
Been
flu
there. Yeah.
now. Yeah.
So it's, yeah, that's the idea of being sustainability. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yes.
at every level, like the individual level up to society. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I think working part of, to go back to your original question, part of working smarter is thinking about the long term.
yeah. So kind of on that note, like if you kind of flip that around and we're talking to people that may be going through these things that we've experienced and learned from, and may experience and learn from at another level. How do you think about helping those people? What do you think about the importance of mentoring? How has mentoring played a role in your life?
Hmm.
How does it unfold in your work?
I think my favorite kind of mentoring is the very informal kind.
Yeah.
I've had weirdly negative experiences with, and now you will click this button and sign up for a mentoring program, and then we will put it
Mm,
through a spreadsheet and you will get assigned a buddy. I'm not saying those are inherently bad, but
yeah.
it's a little awkward. And then you're sort of like, oh, well, we're supposed to do this thing because this system was set up
Hmm.
with these
Hmm.
guidelines. Usually I love a system, right? Like I love give me
Yeah.
some guardrails and give me some homework and I'll slay this. But I have found that the most valuable mentors have been really informal,
Hmm.
random coffee meetings, almost like I ran into you and I just a problem that I was having and you gave me some advice on it. So that is the spirit that I am now trying to carry into the mentoring that I'm
Mm,
doing is always be generous. I think especially in my industry, I do not believe in competition. I believe that the pie is big enough for all of
hmm.
us. People, ops, culture, consultants, coaches. There's a lot of us out there, but it's for a reason. And the less cutthroat we can be and the more generous we can be, because like I said, there's nothing new under the sun. So there's no real secret here. Okay. We're not protecting the recipe of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
So just share your wisdom. And I guess there's a theme here, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but share your wisdom in a really vulnerable way. Like talk a lot about your mistakes.
Yeah.
Talk about where you messed up or you've
Why is
asked
that? Why is that important?
yeah, you've asked me a lot of really good questions and I'm like, I don't really have an intentional answer for that, I don't have oh, well, I was really, strategic about how I went about that thing. Luck exists and blessings exist and serendipity exists. So I think it's important as a mentor to not always just don't take credit for everything.
Mm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Kind of acknowledge that there is not a formula, a silver bullet. It's
Why do
very
people want a formula and a silver bullet?
maybe it goes back to your question of they equate working smarter with working easier. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, just I think maybe our just cultural obsession with efficiency and
yeah,
results. Yeah,
yeah,
instead of that true deep wisdom that
yeah,
comes from the ebb and flow of things.
yeah.
Hmm.
When you think about stories, real and fictional, what narratives or stories have shaped you as a person?
Goal to read as many books each year as I am years old,
Oh,
which
wow.
means the goal gets harder every year. My age changes, the number of weeks in the year do not. But that is where I want my life to go. That to me
Okay.
is a definition of success is if I have increasingly more time to be still and to read both fictional and non-fictional narratives. Man, I think it's so important. So I've always loved reading. I've always loved story. I mean, I could point to, I guess, some of my favorite narratives or stories growing up, but I think some of the most impactful ones on me lately have been to read fictional stories where I have a really hard time empathizing with the main character because they not white or female or raised in the Midwest or,
Mm,
whatever, fill in the blank
yeah.
version of my identity. So I think to be intentional and to seek out narratives that have or stories where there's like a little bit of friction against your
Mm,
values. If you're like, oh, this is what I believe about the world and this is what's right and this is what's wrong. And then you read a story about a main character who pushes against that, that's where I think the real opportunity is with story is to get underneath
mm.
the clickbait headline or whatever and get into what's the real emotional complexity of those characters in these stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so because that creates a tension, you have to intentionally lean into it, whereas it may not be a natural thing to do what you're describing. Is
Oh, of
that correct?
course not. Yeah, absolutely. Our natural tendency is to just keep listening to the same, to go towards our tribe and to listen to the same
Uh-huh.
self-validating, yeah. That's what I love about TED Talks is a lot of times they just share stuff that you kind of already knew or already believed. And you're like, yeah, that one's so good because I already basically thought that or had that happen. Yeah. So
So
I think
what cast a vision, a compelling vision for why people should do what you're describing, even though they may not feel like doing it? And it could be whether it's reading or watching a movie, or maybe it's just talking with someone that has that story too.
yeah. Well, that's the thing is talking with somebody who has the story, I think is it's a challenge. You meet someone in real life and you're like, oh, I want to honor the fact that there's a real human being sitting here in front of me, but wow, you voted differently than me. You go to a different, faith institution than I do. And then you kind of swallow and you're like, gulp, is this safe? Like, what do we talk about? Whereas when you read or you watch movies, it's a safe
Mm,
place to
oh, okay. That's
practice.
interesting dynamic. Yeah.
It's a safe place to practice empathy, and then you can kind of bring those two-dimensional characters into
Hmm.
your three-dimensional life. I don't know if I am up to the challenge of your question of casting a vision. All I can say is that when I've listened to, did you ever listen to Blue Babies Pink?
Mm-mm.
It's a podcast series from BT Harmon, and
Okay.
it's his story about growing up as a Christian boy in the South and realizing that he was gay.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it's like 7-minute episodes, and there's like a few of them, but it's like you're listening to this person
Mm,
tell their real story, but you're sort of digesting it and processing it in a safe
hmm.
space where you don't
Yeah.
have to react and go,
Mm,
well, I agree with that or I disagree with that, which I did 700 times, right? As I
yeah.
was
Yeah.
listening to all that story, or you listen to The Moth or these story slam
Hmm.
kind of, I think it's powerful to hear the
Yeah.
audio part of
Yeah.
it, right? When they're telling their story about, I never thought that situation would warrant that much internal struggle about
Hmm.
what you decided to do with your
Yeah.
Or like I listened to this story about a single dad raising a 4-year-old deaf child. And as soon as the child got implants so that they could
Mm,
communicate with the world, I believe it was a little girl. And the little girl, the first thing that she said when she started to be able to listen and communicate was, "I'm a boy, and everybody needs to know that I'm a boy."
mm,
And then it's like, what do I do with this? Right? Like
yeah.
already I've gone through all these struggles, and like here's another thing
Well,
to address.
here's that kind of illuminates a very interesting dynamic because you say
Yeah.
it's safe for the person to consume that and think through it and hear it, but it requires someone to step out of safety to share it.
Yeah.
They're filling the gap in order for that safety to be provided. That's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. So that I hope, right, the more that we hear people being raw in their and sharing their own stories, that
Yeah.
we feel more comfortable and sharing that with others. And the other thing that I really like is, NPR StoryCorps, where, you
Okay.
listen to
Yeah.
two
Hmm.
people having a conversation with each other. I just signed up for, I can't remember the name of it, but I'll find it so we can put it in the show notes. But it's like you submit your profile and all of your,
Oh,
identity
okay.
stuff, and they match you up to have a recorded conversation with somebody who grew
Yeah.
up in a very different way than you did or whatever.
Yeah. There's a
And
show on YouTube like that called Jubilee.
oh yeah, yeah, the
Yeah.
middle ground or common ground. We've
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
watching a bunch of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so you go from watching people doing that in the room to like, okay, well now I signed up to do this myself. And it's definitely less safe,
Yeah.
but I'm excited that it's out there
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
us.
People willing to take a risk, be vulnerable. Kind of, I think of the idea of like permission to go second. They're giving people permission to go second because they're going first,
Here's the
which,
thing I think about, yeah, sorry. I'm so sorry,
no,
Jason.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Obviously, this is an exciting conversation for me. I think the thing people forget about empathy is you can have empathy for someone else without agreeing
Mm,
with any of their choices. Empathy, I think, is a safer place to be. Empathy is kind of only, in a lot of cases, it's just an intellectual place where you can go,
mm-hmm.
oh, I wouldn't have made that choice to steal those shoes, but I understand. And my brain can process your story that you
Yeah.
stole those shoes. And that's different than, oh my gosh, now I'm going to go change my life and be more like you and go steal shoes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think and that is a really powerful, that's a way that stories one of the things that I've discovered, I had this parable that I used to tell and I actually did a workshop and I just discovered that stories have a way of disarming all of the fortresses that we build to protect us from the things on the other side of those insights and revelations.
Yeah.
Stories like sneak through.
Yep.
And it's just a powerful way to accomplish what you're describing when we might want to guard ourselves against it for variety of reasons, some
Yeah.
positive and some negative, but of which may cause negative consequences. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Stories
Yeah,
sneak through.
yeah. What about the flip side? Systems. What do you think about systems? You said you love systems. How do you think about systems? What are systems to you?
I guess, it's maybe habits, rituals, things that can show up consistently, guardrails. I think I used to be a lot more obsessed with systems than I am
Hmm.
now. And
Hmm.
I think that's all of our maturity. You kind of, as a kid, it's like, you do not cross the street. You do not touch the hot stove.
Mm,
This is when you get on the bus, you have to get this GPA. There are so many externally enforced systems, and it gives you this false sense of, oh, I know how to win the world, right? I know how to please
mm,
authority and like check the boxes. So maybe you notice, like, as we were having that empathy story conversation, I think I got a little like, ooh. And then now that you want to talk about systems, I'm like, the season that I'm in right now is a belief that I just got trained in organizational relationship systems coaching. And some of their principles are that systems are emerging all the time.
mm,
They are always changing. So, yeah, we can set up some habits and some rituals and some guardrails, like my workflow system that works for me in a day or in a week or in a month. But it's got to be open to change, right? It's
so when does a system become tyrannical?
when you don't when it doesn't honor the humanity, maybe.
Mm.
Yeah, the humanity of whatever makes up the system. So I think that's probably true. I love that. I love that question, Jason. I'm wondering if it's, if it's our own systems, like when we lose touch with ourselves, again, like losing sight of our own values, or like that trust in your gut kind of thing. But yeah, when does a system become tyrannical? I think is maybe when there's a really out of sync, power dynamic that doesn't honor the intelligence of the whole, right?
Hmm.
Of every component or every voice that makes
Yeah,
up the system.
yeah. And and maybe a part of that would be pushing people out of the system that in a unhealthy way.
Okay, so, right, to be fair, I think there's systems that we choose to be a part of, and then there's
Mm,
systems that we don't have choice on,
yeah, yeah,
whether we're a part of it or not. So I think there's something to be said about, like, if you're in a system that isn't working for you anymore, like, leave the system,
yeah.
if you can. But if you are responsible for a system
Got it.
where
Yeah.
there isn't as much choice, that's a
Hmm.
lot of responsibility.
Yeah, and I think of Martin Luther King Jr. just as a great example of like how do you change a system from the inside out when it is tyrannical, and he found a way to do it miraculously. So but
And he
it was
paid
very,
for it
there
with
was
his
a huge
life.
sacrifice. Yeah, there was a huge sacrifice that it required both for him and a lot of people, and then a lot of
And
suffering to get there. But
yeah, and right, somebody that I was listening to the other day reminded me that he was hugely unpopular at
yeah,
the time of his death,
oh
right?
yeah,
He was not, we've sort of made him Santa Claus, right? Like
mm.
we've kind of made him
Like
like,
looking back,
he's
we were
a
not
great
as
guy, and
antagonistic
we
towards
all
it.
loved him.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think there are in real systems now that I'm like, oh yeah, it's hard, it's habits and it's guardrails and it's structure. It's actually they're really messy. Real
yeah.
systems are really
So
messy, aren't they?
a lot of times there are layers that are invisible to see.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, right, I think honoring change is the most important thing, whether we're talking about stories or we're talking about systems. I'm so glad that I've been able to change and to learn from my mistakes and to go back and fall in love with those
Hmm.
mistakes and be in a safe place where I can voice them.
Yeah.
And that is sort of my like big message in my life and in my community right now is if you're managing somebody at work and they're a pain and they're not doing their job right or whatever, they can change and you have to give them the opportunity to change. If your family, when you go home for Thanksgiving dinner, is constantly being ignorant and,
Yeah.
like voicing a bunch of stuff that you disagree with, they also, like, everybody can change and it's never too late.
Hmm.
So that's sort of the positionality and the wisdom that I'm trying to bring into the world. That's what
Yeah.
consulting and coaching and my work is all about, creating the ground conditions for change so that people have the opportunity, like you said, like kind of just keep
Yeah.
evolving in this like bigger spiral.
So what parting words of wisdom do you have for us? Is there something you want to share that you didn't yet get a chance to do?
Oh, can I rewind 15 seconds? Because what I just
Yeah.
said, I think is
Okay.
it.
So that
Yeah.
covered it.
Yeah, I think so. It's kind of, I don't know if I have anything more wise than that, but
You
thanks.
put it all out there. So let's say someone's listening and they say, you know what, I wanna hire you, Teresa, to speak at our event, or I wanna work with Fiery Feather. Who's a good fit, and what's the problem that they are having that is a good fit for either of those?
Well, as far as who's a good fit, I'm industry agnostic. I love working with like big Fortune 500 companies. I love working with startups and like nonprofits. And I know that's supposed to be the kiss of death for entrepreneurship, but humans are humans in every system.
Yeah,
So I really like working. It's very stimulating and energizing for me to connect those dots between big and little companies and all kinds of
yeah.
different industries. So problems or pain points that my clients usually have when they bring me in is they're trying to get their team or their company from like this level to the next level, right?
Mm,
In professionalism, in cohesive culture, in communication skills. It's kind of like they know that they need to level up, but who has time as a leader, a
mhm.
manager, a CEO to stop running the business and get everybody, functioning better with different communication skills, or get everybody working more on their emotional intelligence, or to get everybody more aligned with a strategic plan. So I love being able to not only go in and speak to teams and organizations about these things and these frameworks and these skills and these best practices, but I love also supporting them in kind of like a long tail way and being a champion to, accountability gets a bad rap, but really to hold them accountable to the change that they know they want to see for their
Yeah.
individuals. Yeah. Did
Okay.
that answer the question?
I think so. I mean, what about speaking? If someone is interested in having you speak at their event or their conference, why would they want you to come and make a Mary Poppins appearance?
Besides the fact that I'm going to like promise a talking umbrella on stage, jump into a chalk painting, I'll tell you, I guess, the three most popular topics that I'm being asked to speak on
Yeah.
lately are navigating change with resilience, whether that's the economy is changing, the administration is changing, folks are dealing with change, and unwelcome change can cause us to just like lock up, right? And get
Hmm.
frozen, paralyzed, and get cranky with one another, and it's completely unproductive. So
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot about how to navigate change.
Yeah.
I've also been talking a lot about how to help leaders and managers spark the entrepreneurial spirit in their employees, which does not
Mm.
mean get a side hustle and leave your job like we were talking about. It means, how do I take ownership of
Hmm.
what's
Yeah.
happening in the workplace and not be a victim of it,
Mm.
not sort of be a passive consumer of,
Yeah.
oh, my boss or my company, or nobody wants to talk to me on Slack and like all of this. It's like, no, you have your locus of control is bigger than you think. So how can you get more junior employees more engaged
Yeah.
and taking more ownership? So that's two. And then I think three is like that seasonal strategic planning that I
Hmm.
was talking about
Hmm. Okay.
with,
Yeah.
yeah, embracing the winter and the spring and the summer of all of your different projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, and how do people find what's your website? How do they, are you on social media? Which ones?
Fieryfeather.com is my website, Fiery feather. And I am predominantly on LinkedIn.
All right.
So I'm there as Theresa Ward, M as in Marie. And that's usually where I'm sharing a lot of the things that we talked about today. These like little James Clear quotes and,
Yeah.
videos on seasonal strategic planning. So yeah, hopefully that'll be a helpful resource to your folks.
Yeah. Well, Teresa, thank you so much for sharing your life with us today.
Jason, this was a really energizing and stimulating conversation, and I'm going to be just riding high for the rest of the afternoon. Thanks so much
All
for the
right.
chat.
Yeah, you're welcome.